So hello, bonjour, oki, dana nestada, aba wash teth, and bozu. Welcome back, some of you, and welcome to the Canadian Rockies Youth Summit. If you're joining us now for the first time, this summit is a 3-day event hosted online. So in the spirit of respect, reciprocity, and truth, we honor and acknowledge the Canmore area known as Chuwap Chipchin Kudibi, which is translated in Stoney Nakoda as shooting the willows, and the traditional Treaty 7 territory and oral practices of the Iyarhe Nakota, comprised of the Bearspaw, Chiniki, and Wesley First Nations, as well as the Tsuut'ina First Nation and the Blackfoot Confederacy, comprised of the Siksika, Piikani, and Kainai. We acknowledge that this territory is home to the Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 3, within the historical Northwest Métis homeland. We acknowledge all nations who live, work, and play, and help us steward this land and honor and celebrate this territory. So about the Canadian Rockies Youth Summit, we are a youth-led network who aim to empower youth to take action on environmental issues in the shared wild spaces. So with our partner, the Biosphere Institute of the Bow Valley, we have kind of co-designed and co-organized this network that really helps connect youth together and connects youth with mentors. And we're overall trying to create a body of youth that is consulted regularly on land management decisions. So thank you today for Lisa, who is going to be presenting as, I guess, who's going to be our presenter today. And of course, I'd like to thank the Biosphere Institute of the Bow Valley, who has partnered with us to help create the summit and the network this year, and also the Calgary Foundation, who has very generously donated us a grant, and also the Assembly of First Nations, who have allowed this to run. So a little bit about our presenter. Lisa is a guide, writer, art historian, and mountain lover. She has worked in the art world for over 30 years and as a director of Calgary's Heffel Fine Art Auction House, as an associate curator of art at the Glenbow Museum and curator of art at the White Museum of the Canadian Rockies. She also works as a freelancer, writing and curating for galleries and auction houses, including the Audion Art Museum, the Art Gallery of Hamilton, the Cowley Abbott Fine Art, and the Art Gallery of Alberta. That's a lot of art. She has served on numerous boards, including the board of Alberta's Museum Association, the Art Advisory Council of Calgary's Military Museums, and is a trustee of the board of the Layton Art Center. She's a graduate of the University of Calgary and is a sole author of 4 books on Canadian art history: A Hiker's Guide to the Art of the Canadian Rockies, A Hiker's Guide to Rocky Mountain Art of Lauren Harris, The Lake O'Hara Art of J.E.H. MacDonald, and Hiker's Guide and Truth and Beauty in the Canadian Rockies, Exploring the Art of Walter J. Phillips, published in 2019. Thank you so much, Lisa, for coming. It's really nice to meet you, and I'm really excited to hear what you have to say.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I'm guilty of the art historian's love of words. I have never had a book title that doesn't have at least a colon or a semicolon in the middle. Nice, big, long titles. So thanks for introducing me. That's great. If it's all right, I'd like to start sharing my screen now. Unless you have any other things that you'd like to do before I begin?
No, that's perfect. Go
Great.
right ahead.
All right, so here we go. Hang on. There we are. All right, so thanks so much to you guys for asking me. I was able to participate, well, I shouldn't say participate, observe a little bit this afternoon. And I was really impressed with the level of discussion that you were having, with the conversations you were having, with the speaking. And I found that I had to go back and reevaluate some of the things I had to say based on some thoughts that occurred to me because of your conversations this afternoon. So, and I'm going to talk about those tonight. So thank you very much for that. You've inspired me. So a bit about me, in addition to what was just said, which was a lot. I've published 4 books on Canadian art. They're basically trail guides. So what I do is I take you to the place where this or that artist sat to work and try to match it up exactly. From Waterton, way down in the south, all the way up to the Canadian Arctic, looking for places where artists have sat to work. It's a satisfying way to spend my time. It has allowed me to combine my love of art history and my love of the outdoors together, which is pretty sweet. And I'm still looking for places where artists sat to work. Basically what I do is try to match up the exact spot and the painting. So if any of you are skiers, you'll recognize the lovely little inset into this. This is the strawberry chair here. This is the Standish chair here up at Sunshine. And in the distance behind is a Walter Phillips watercolor of what those places look like before chairs exist, with the skiers in the foreground having to walk up and then ski back down. That's how it was done then. So this is my quest. This is what I do. And I've had great enjoyment finding these places and have made a career of it. But I've noticed something quite significant over the course of this time. I've noticed that the mountains, as places of beauty, as places of grandeur, as places of incredible history, as places of unbelievable life, have given me a sense of connection, a sense of connection to beauty and to history that I didn't expect would be part of it. And this is my why: the search for the place that the artist found significant enough to paint. And that's a big deal, art historically. So we're very, in terms of how we can get about in the mountains now, we have a lot of conveniences. We have Gore-Tex, we have roads to these places. We have a lot of things that these people 100 years ago, 120 years ago didn't have. It was a big deal for them to go far into the backcountry. And when they sat down and selected a place that was significant enough for them to turn into a painting, that speaks to what they thought of it, how they felt about it, why. The why of it: was it this spot? Was because it was particularly beautiful, because it was at the end of the trail? It's the why that I'm very interested in. So my why has been a search for beauty. And when I was preparing my words for tonight and looking at the content of your summit, and in particular the theme of your summits, how hope becomes action, I thought about the why of your mountains. Why do you all care about the mountains? What is your why, and how does that become action? Is it a place where you go to connect with friends? Is it a place where you go to seek quiet, to seek solitude, to have a change from every day? What is it about the mountains? Why do we care about them? For me, it's about respect. It's about beauty. It's about the quiet of the place. It's about stewardship. It's about turning that kind of care, that respect for beauty, into action. And what struck me this afternoon when I was listening to your conversation is the role that these artworks can play. So I added this slide today. This painting, the one that you see on the left-hand side of your screen, sold for $11.21 million in 2016. It's by Lauren Harris. It's a painting of Mount Ishbel McDonald, which, if you know the highway between Banff and Lake Louise, it's at the biggest of the westbound roadside pullouts, the one that has 2 bithies. This is what you see over the fence. It's not, in terms of mountain scenery, an incredibly spectacular place like Lake Louise could be, or Lake O'Hara could be. It's a little more nondescript, and yet this painting, it's a big painting, 5 feet by 5 feet, sold for that much money in 2016. So what does that mean? And what can that mean for the mountains? And that's the question that hit me this afternoon, one that I'd never thought of before in all my years of working as an art historian. I'd never thought about the why of that. I had thought about a lot of other things, but not the why of that. So thank you very much for giving me that. And then I returned to my original thoughts about the how of the mountains, the why of the mountains, the how we act in there. And something that I've really noticed, I've been an avid hiker my whole life. I think my first big backpack was probably when I was in grade 11, and I had a terrible tent and it leaked, and I had a terrible sleeping bag that got wet, and I was freezing cold and miserable the whole time. And yet I've been coming back for more and more and more. And at that point in my life, the destination was the point. Now, when I hike, it's the journey that's the point. And I think how we use the mountains, why we go there, respect how we conduct ourselves when we're there is incredibly important to the future of the Canadian Rockies. When we're in a place that we care for, like this beautiful view of Herbert Lake, which is just off where the Highway 93 goes to Jasper, and Trans-Canada carries on to Field and into British Columbia. This is the first lake that you'll see on Highway 93, and this is a beautiful watercolor by Walter Phillips. It's a scene of absolute serenity. And to me, when I think of that lake, because I've been studying these artists for so long, I think of their paintings almost immediately when I think of the place. And those paintings have definitely shaped the way I behave when I go there, that I'm quiet and that I'm respectful, and that I've come to think of these places almost as hallowed ground, places that I have to take my behavior into a different state when I'm there. And that's been a wonderful gift to me to look at the mountains that way. And it's not an easy thing to do, because the mountains are busy places, and the mountains are places with deadlines and agendas. And when you have a spot on the bus to Lake O'Hara on one day, you have to be there at that time or you're not going to get to go. And when you have a campground reservation for a certain time, you have to go then or you're not going to get to go. So to take that ideal of quiet solitude and slow, methodical thinking and walking, and to match it up with our present day mountains, there's a real disconnect there. And this brings me back to that question that you guys raised for me this afternoon. What can these paintings, what can Canadian art history do to help with that dilemma that we face? How can paintings like, this is actually a print, Walter Phillips's print of Lake Louise on the left-hand side, how can that shape the reality of the shoreline of Lake Louise, which we see on the right-hand side? Is it even possible to have solitude there anymore? And what do these iconic images, paintings, everything I'm showing you tonight is either in a public, well, I think they're almost all, about 90% in public museum collections or in private collections. Very well cared for, very well studied, and really in terms of Canadian art history, these things are revered. That first painting I showed you that sold for $11 million is kind of a Mona Lisa of Canadian mountain art. So we care for them in that same way. We treat them as icons, respect them in that way. How can we take that and move it forward into what we need to do with our mountains? Other things that I've been thinking about in the 30 years that I've been studying are that how I feel when I'm in the mountains, which I noticed a long time ago. I noticed it quite profoundly one day when I was hiking up at the Emerald Glacier in Yoho National Park on a trail that no longer exists. The trail routes were changed to create a wildlife path. So if any of you know, the old Highline Trail is now Skyline, or the Iceline Trail, the high up trail. And that trail takes you really close to the glacier. And I was hiking up there on a day when it was really misty and foggy and sucked in. And I knew the glacier was right beside me, but I couldn't see it. But I felt its presence. And that was really strong, this presence, this life, this thing that was there, right there next to me. Even though I couldn't see it, I knew it was there. And I knew then, this is 24 years ago that this happened, that the mountains were affecting my behavior. Modern science now, the study of epigenetics, has taught us that our surroundings absolutely influence our behavior. They influence us genetically and they influence us down to the generations. So what do we want our mountains to be? This is painting by Lorne Harris, who is one of my favorite Canadian artists because he's intriguing in so many ways. And to get to this painting, it's about 27 to 32 kilometers, depending on which trail you take, into the backcountry. It's an effort to get there. And I had the great fortune to spend time there on a day when it looked just like this, exactly like this. The color of the glacier was this way. it had been very stormy, and then the light broke through, and so the sky in the distance was dark like this, and the glacier, and it was all lit up. The mountain was lit up. It was a profoundly impactful experience for me on how I feel about the mountains and what artists have seen in the mountains, and the importance of the message that's hidden in this work. And yeah, they're valuable. Yeah, they're worth a lot of money, and yeah, they're important, but I think there's more to it than that. And I don't think I quite know the answer yet to that question, what that question is and where it can take us in terms of the very pressing influences that the pressing agendas of the mountains now. The mountains they've been commodified, packaged up and sold back to us. We pay for a parks pass, we pay for a trail pass, we pay for a trail experience, we pay for a guided hike, and I lead those hikes and ask people to pay for those hikes. But how can these incredibly important and beautiful paintings shape how we conduct ourselves in relationship to not just the mountain landscape, but any landscape going forward? I think it's a very interesting question. What kind of places do we want our national parks, our mountains to be? Are they a product? Are they industry? Are they somewhere that we can't go because there's too many people and we can't get in the queue? We either can't afford it or there's just too many. Are they our friends? Are they places of pilgrimages? Are they places of incredible, serene, unpeopled beauty with no human life in them? It's no coincidence that these paintings, for the most part, have absolutely no evidence of humans. There's no buildings, there's no roads, there's no trails, no hotels, no lodges, nothing. That's a very significant part of it. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about 3 artists that I've studied and what I've learned from them. They've taught me to slow down, to be quiet and respectful. First one, of course, is Lauren Harris that you see. Actually, he's the second one. First one I'm going to talk about is J.H. MacDonald. J.H. MacDonald was also a member of the group of 7. And he was a very interesting man. I would say is kind of the opposite character-wise of Lauren Harris. He was quiet. He was very poetic, a beautiful writer, a lovely painter, and he suffered from a lot of difficulty in his life. In 1916, the medical terminology wasn't the same as it is now, and accounts from that time describe him as having a complete breakdown, a nervous breakdown of some kind of struggle with his mental health. He had a family to support. He was working as an artist and was unable financially to support them. He'd had a lot of trauma in his life, and he was unhappy. Then the group of 7 comes along. They form in 1920, and all of a sudden he's kind of a famous guy and in spotlight. And I know it's hard to believe, but a painting like this from 1926 in those days was considered pretty radical. And there was a lot of controversy around their work. But J.H. MacDonald came to the mountains and found there something that allowed his inner man. In the previous slide, you might have read the quote about the inner man. That's MacDonald in his journals, writing about how he's feeling. He refers to the inner man. The inner man is struggling. The inner man is tense. Then the inner man, as he gets to the mountains, becomes better and better and better and better. And I think it's MacDonald talking about how he's feeling, his state of being. And the mountains did something so wonderful for him that they allowed him to write this incredibly beautiful poem with words like "my soul wandering" and "I would away." It's absolutely beautiful expression of someone who's in a really positive state of mind. And that's what the mountains do for me. That's a big part of my why. So MacDonald had nature in his life as a healing power, and it allowed him to create these beautiful works of art. These are all canvases that belong to the Art Gallery of Ontario or the National Gallery. One's in the Musée Joliette, Quebec. A few of his on-the-spot sketches, all painted while he was writing in his journal. He's great. He's an art historian's dream to study because he would go out during the day and he would sketch, and then he would go back at night and he would journal. And you can match them up and you can read about how he was in a state of absolute bliss. He was loving it. He was having the most wonderful time, even though he was caught out in the hail or caught out in a summer snowstorm. And if you look at these works, you'll realize that these aren't perfect weather sketches. These aren't blue sky days with warm sun shining and flowers blooming and the lake gleaming. These are days of unsettled weather, but that was MacDonald's euphoria. And I find that very interesting as well. He would go back to Toronto after about a 4 to 6 week stay at Lake O'Hara. It's the only place he really spent any time in the Canadian Rockies, and then create these larger studio canvases, which were exhibited with the group of 7. And it always was the place that he returned to in his mind's eye, the place that made him the happiest. The next artist, of course, is Lawrence Harris. His why was completely different than J.H. MacDonald's. He was seeking a mystical experience. He was a person who felt that it was his duty as an artist to understand something, a greater power in nature, a greater spirit, a greater force, a greater essence, whatever word you want to use, something more than daily life, and to capture it and to give it back to us. That was his job, and he took that job very seriously. He saw himself as a bit of a messiah in a way, who, if he opened his mind and he conducted his life in such a way and went to the right places, which for him was always above tree line in the Canadian Rockies or in the Canadian Arctic, where he also worked, high, high, high upon the globe, above the globe's tree line, he could capture this essence of nature and convey it back to us in these absolutely beautiful paintings. Always the high landscape, always the alpine, always connecting. His career evolved dramatically over the course of his life. These 8 slides take you from 1916 to the 1970s. Became an abstraction painter in the latter part of his life, but you can see that that abstraction is always based on the experience of nature, in particular the mountain experience, for his whole life. Every time I visit anywhere where Harris worked, I feel like I learned something new about him, and it's the place that's telling me about that. Yes, I have the paintings in my mind's eye, and yes, I carry reproductions with me in a binder in my backpack, but it's the place that's telling me that. So why truth? Why beauty? This is the cover of my most recent book, very long title. I was exposed to Phillips's prints 30 years ago and have been thinking about them all of that time. Now, I mentioned that big painting, that $1 million painting, is 5 feet square. Walter Phillips's works are small. They are quiet. And I feel like they speak to me. It's like a little whisper in my ear telling me, you know, it doesn't need to be this big. It doesn't need to be this grand. It can be something very small as well. That's talking to you about the beauty of the mountains. He was a very traditional English watercolor painter. They're absolutely subtle. They're also, in terms of their life as paintings, they're really fragile things. So in a way, they're very precious because some of them get lost and damaged over time. That's just the nature of artwork. But following in his footsteps the last few years has been so much fun. And if you look at this is up at the Opavin Plateau at Lake O'Hara, you can see that the rock is the rock, and how accurate he was. This little rock is this rock here. He would go up there, he would work, he would do these beautiful on-the-spot watercolors and then take them back into his studio on his home in Banff on Tunnel Mountain and turn them into these beautiful little woodblock prints. Absolutely wonderful. He had great depth of character. His writing is beautiful, and he has caused me to become even more quieter when I'm in the mountains. More quieter, that's not it right. He has caused me to be more quiet when I'm in the mountains and to listen to what they're telling me. He spent hours looking in order to create watercolors like this one that you see on the left, and to turn them into these prints like the one you see on the right. So those are the whys of my exploration in the mountains. There's still an awful lot of them that I need to answer, though. You know, this is it for me. This is basically what I do. There's the photo on the bottom of the Ermite Valley, Tonquin Valley. This is the place right here. This is Harris's drawing of it. And this is the painting of it. That's my why and what I've always been doing. But now I'm thinking of the how. How can this $1 million painting, $11 million painting, shape the way we treat the Canadian Rockies? So that's what I wanted to share with you today. I think that might be exactly 25 minutes. Sorry, Mallory, I went over by a few minutes, but I'd love to entertain any questions if you've got them. and talk more about anything that was of any particular interest in what I've shared with you.
Thank you, Lisa. So yeah, Mallory, if anybody here has any questions, there's a link in the chat where you can find the Q&A. Mallory, if there's any questions that pop up,
Absolutely.
Hold on.
I will just pull that up now.
Great. Yeah, Lisa, I really like that art. That art really, I don't know, I feel like it connects with me a lot just because, well, one, I'm a mountain guy. I'm always on the mountains. And also, I guess, something about how that art was made. I'm very, I guess, neat, and I like clean things. So I don't know, just the way he kind of organized those lines and those paintings, I found interesting. The way he organized the snow.
It's really interesting that you should say that, because I don't know if you guys know Chick Scott, but he's kind of a guru of climbing in the mountains, and a friend of mine, and he said something so interesting to me once. He said that he could pick his way up Mount Robson using Lauren Harris's painting as a map.
Oh, wow.
And I thought, wow. So what does that mean about what features of that place attracted Lauren Harris the most? And because Harris left stuff out, like he'd take entire lakes and leave them out. And his painting of Mount Lefroy has Mount Lefroy here and the mitre here. And then there's another painting, no mitre, it's gone. Let's just forget about that whole feature. He did that. And he pared things down to the absolute essence of them, the skeleton of them. And it's very poetic. They're in a way, they're kind of like a haiku. There's not an extra word there. Not an extra brushstroke there.
And the other thing I guess I wanted to add on was that I guess when I go to the mountains, one of the big draws to me is that I find kind of peace and quiet out in the mountains. Even just on a ski hill, when I can get onto a run just by myself or in the trees, like in a beautiful forest, on a hike, just with a couple of friends, it's very quiet. Or like in the Palisades Center last summit, we just kind of laid down on the forest floor for a bit and just watched the stars. And those are the most special moments to me, I guess. And I think even through art, like they are able to communicate that type of silence in a way. And anyways, I just, even as in terms of action projects as youth, I wish that's something more youth would feel and more youth would experience in their lives.
Yeah, and it's I've watched, my youngest is 22. I have 3 kids, and I watched the amount of art that they were exposed to in their educations really dwindle over the course of their K to 12 years. It was kind of non-existent, and I was really lucky being old enough to have been at school in the 60s and 70s when that was a very big part of education, all the way right through till high school. It was a very big part of it. In fact, my high school had 5 art teachers. And so I had a different opportunity there. And I think that's a shame. And I think that the creative spirit, artists, writers, as well as the creative spirit of nature together can bring about things that can be so impactful. And I know it's another kind of commodification, but if you just think of what an individual was willing to pay to own that painting, to have that painting, speaks to the care and respect for that landscape. And it's easy to say, oh yeah, it's just a rich person who bought that painting. It's not about that. It's actually about a long-standing relationship with place and with the history of that painting, and with a deep, deep desire to experience what that painting has to offer on a daily basis. So I think art can be really important. And I think that's a question that just really came to me in terms of hope and action today, and that I don't think I'll be able to go hiking without having that one come into my mind from now on. And that's because of you guys. So
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you. That chat was so amazing. I was going to ask you, why do you think that this $11 million painting would change the way that we view the mountains. But I think you kind of answered it when you said like that sense of place, like, and that was the beginning of one of our first workshops. A couple chats, a couple questions in the chat. Well, one comment is from Sean Green. Mountains are such icons for the Canadians. I think about the early posters advertising mountains to new immigrants. I wonder if the mountains will be able to inspire the next generation to take action on climate change. So that's really cool.
Absolutely. I absolutely hope they will. And that, you know, kind of being raised on that imagery and being raised as a nation on that imagery. Will we ever have another group of painters who capture our attention in the same way because of what they were expressing? And the Group of Seven's purpose, they said, was to express the Canada that they saw, not the Canada that their ancestry in terms of art history. So if they were an art historian from here or an artist from here or there, it wasn't that they wanted to express. They wanted to express their voice. So the voice now needs to come out in art. It really does. And I would say that's a challenge to young artists and to young painters too. And there are many that are doing that. There are many very interesting artists who are doing all sorts of work, and it's not just painting, it's installation, it's audio work. And Dan Hudson is a great example of some really interesting work. And I don't know if you've seen his stuff, but the White Museum will have it on their archives because they've shown his work a lot. You know, videos of people coming and going on the shore of this or that lake, and interaction of people with the environment. So yeah, and artists push. Artists are the ones that are always pushing, thinking forward.
Well, and since Sean Green did bring up that element of inspiring climate change action, Ben, do you want to plug the youth challenge that we've teamed up with the Rockies Repeat to create? I'm just going to share my screen.
Okay.
Sure. Yeah, if you have that there. So yeah, we're teaming up with Rockies Repeat. And basically the challenges, I might miss a couple of these points, but I'm pretty sure the founder of Rockies Repeat has gone to a lot of these places and painted pictures of the mountains. And I guess kind of the goal of Rockies Repeat is to document the change in mountain places that we are seeing happening over the years. So the challenge this year to youth is that we want students to go out to these places, to these pictures that Rockies Repeat has, and we want them to, I guess, draw the mountains or make a sketch of the mountains or paint the mountains in that exact spot. And I guess then we can go back and compare between our original pictures and these pictures. And then in the future, we can continue to do this. And over time, we can document how the mountains are changing, which is really neat. And I think it's really cool that they're getting youth through this because, well, youth are very creative, and a lot of us, not me, but a lot of us are artists. And yeah, I think we can make some pretty amazing stuff, judging by even some of the stuff we saw last night from youth. So
yeah, that's really exciting.
And we'll drop all the links to that in just the chat if anybody is interested, but it's Rockies Repeat Film. And then you just click on the very top tab, and they created a special tab just for this project, and it's Youth Challenge.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
Well done, guys. That's great.
Maybe I'll have to submit like a little cartoon drawing with stick figures. And
well, I think there was another question in the chat from Adam Robb. Adam Robb, do you want to ask that question, or we'll just read it out for you? Okay, chat. Read it. He has a baby in his hands. So why do you think we put paintings of mountains in our homes, Lisa?
Oh, that's a great question. For me, I have some particular paintings of mountains in my home. I have quite a few paintings of mountains in my home that take me to places that I wish I could be more. Maybe I'll borrow the words Actually, I'll use some of my own words. Once I was asked to describe the difference between J.H. MacDonald's sketches and his canvases, because they're really, really different. And I said, well, you know that moment when you're traveling and you have an experience wherever you are. You have an incredible experience. You're at Hagia Sophia in Turkey. You see the mosque. You go out for a wonderful meal. You meet interesting people. You have this incredible day. How do you sum that all up? How do you capture everything about it? And I think painting can do that. So I think that paintings that we put in our homes of the mountains capture our experiences. So Ben, you're a skier, I'm a skier. What would the painting that captures how you feel about skiing be? Would it be skiing? Would it be the looking down? Would it have audio? Would it be a contemporary work with sound? I'm a big fan of the slushy skiing, so this is my time of year. Slushy ski. Try and go next week. And what would it be? So I think those paintings that we put in homes, I think any art that we put in our homes that we really consider takes us to a place in our head that we wish we could be there in reality.
Mm-hmm.
There is another question for you. It is, what is the best way to experience more of this mountain art? Would you recommend any museums, websites, or literature?
Oh gosh, well, literature, that's one side of my office. The other side's the same, 1,000 books. Of course, there's 4 of mine, which I'll look at mountain art. I would, of course, say number 1 is the White Museum of the Canadian Rockies. And in terms of what it is you want to look at, there's some great galleries in Canmore and Banff and Calgary. Galleries that sell and show historical art are ones that's art by artists who are dead, basically. That's what that means. So that's the kind of work that I have looked at. But there's some great contemporary work as well at Elevation Gallery in Canmore, in the contemporary shows that the White has. It's really all around us. To really get to the good stuff, the historically important stuff, you need to go to Canada's public museums. So places like the White, the Glenbow, the AGO, the National Gallery of Canada, and they all have digitized the majority of their collection. And the McMichael has a group show on right now, I believe. So there's a lot of that online if you're not completely sick of staring at the computer screen. But I think once you find something you really like, I would give you a challenge is to just print it off or put it on your phone or any way that you can take it with you and go to that spot and look at the spot and put them together.
Maybe that's something I'm going to do over the summer for sure. Definitely in August. So we have another question from Sana. Or I don't know if it's a question.
Yeah,
so she says, when leading a sketch or painting a painting session with students, I always find that people are so focused on results, while I always remind them that it's the process more than the product.
Mm-hmm.
As you look at the objects / scenery with different eyes, so I think it's a connecting experience. How do you balance between the result and the process, Lisa?
That's a tough one. And I'll quote another artist, Winona Mulcaster, great Canadian painter. In her elementary school, she did a little painting and her instructor criticized it. And she was done with art because of the criticism of what she had put down. And always remember that until she came back to it. And that part, what you put down, that first mark on the page is so intimidating. It's like the first line of a book or the opening bar of a song. It's so intimidating, like the handshake, the hello, very intimidating. You have to get past that. You have to just go and not be so focused on what it looks like. It's the learning. None of these painters that I've talked about tonight, these aren't their first works. These were all people, in their adult years of life who had been at it a long, long time. Hard work and a lot of work chucked. But all of that work is part of the learning process. And it's being intimidated is something you just have to get past. And the process itself of the creating of the mark making, of the smell of paint, all of those things about art that I really enjoy, the very tactile parts of art, those need to be a big part of the focus too. And you know, I think that there's a lot of pressure to be really good at stuff right from the beginning. You know, you join a soccer team, and if you're not really great right away, it's like, well, oh, I suck, so maybe I'll try hockey, or maybe I'll try this. And that's not how we should be. We should always be learning. We should be lifelong learners. And art is no different. No different. I mean, there were paintings that Lauren Harris did at the end of his life that aren't that great. They're, you know, it's always a process.
I just like to say, I've been in Sana's various, I guess, programs before, and I have done art with her. And quite literally, I was drawing stick figures. But I think it is important that, like, I was thinking back to it, but for me, I guess, as not, you know, a professional artist, it's just really more important to feel what you're drawing and to
Bingo.
feel what you're making.
Bingo.
And yeah, and that's what that's, even though I was ashamed of what I made, I definitely felt where I was. And yeah, it's really neat. There's always this one place that we would go to do that. So
yeah, and
I'm kind of sad I don't get to do that this year, but
well, you've really hit on a key word there, is the feeling. And for me, when I worked in the auction world, there was a lot of volume of artwork that I was dealing with, and these magnificent paintings would just come through, and then they would be gone, and we'd be on to the next sale, and they would come through and be gone and on to the next sale. And there was very significant moments when I would look at a painting and just go, oh, wow. And it was something, the very indescribable. We have a lot of art speak words that we can use to it. The feeling that you get from it, and it's about a connection, and it's different for everyone. Art is so personal. So, but it's about that. It's that wow. That's something that really. I think it's the same in human relations. Why are we attracted to one person over another? There's something there that you connect with. And we need to allow ourselves to let that out more, and to not be so embarrassed about feelings. I always think that I've done a good job giving a talk when I make somebody cry. If I make them really feel something really powerful, then I know, okay, well, yeah, that's what you want, right? And that's good to do that. It's good to be in touch with our emotions.
So Sana just said, that's great to hear. Thanks, Ben and Lisa. And then Sana said, I had that wow moment last night seeing Emily's painting of the Tonquin. It brought me to the place, to that place, a connection. Sean Green said to everyone, I wonder if people will pay 11 million for a painting of the mountains because it represents the cultural value of mountain spaces. Your work adds so much value. Thanks so much. And then I think that we...
Yeah, Amanda also said this applies to acting as well. A lot of art concepts can be transferred between art forms.
Yeah, they can. They really can.
And we do have one question in the chat from Ava Vanderbeek. She was our MC for last night. How do you get yourself to stop criticizing your work? Like for me, I find I get in my head so much, I can't enjoy it.
All the time. And you know what? When I do that, I leave it, because that's not a good productive place for me. And leaving it is very simple. I usually go outside, and outside is all it takes to get me back on track. Interesting. Throughout the pandemic, I've been working largely from home. My husband's working largely from home. The plus side of that is that we've been able to ski, and we have what we jokingly refer to as a staff meeting on the Standish chair, our first write up, every time. And every single time, no matter how challenging the week before has been, no matter what projects created that had to be rescheduled, repostponed, outside fixes it every time. And it brings back, because my work has so much to do with outside and looking and being in the landscape, it allows me to stop being critical of myself and to be re-enthused about ideas that I had a week ago that 3 days ago I thought were totally dumb and nobody's ever going to do that. It brings it all back. So I would say that's another reason why these beautiful, iconic mountain places are so incredibly precious, is because they give us that. They give us something that we need. I need it. I know I need it. So yeah, does that answer that question? I'm not sure that it does, but.
And I think that we just have Nick, and he has his video on, and he's going to ask a question in person. So I'll pin him.
Okay.
Hi, thanks, Lisa. That was awesome. Yeah, I was blessed with athletic ability and not artistic ability, and I've got 2 young kids, and I just thought, as a parent yourself, I'd love to, like my 5-year-old, she's very artistic, and having kids of your own, what are some great ways to get them out in nature? Like, I get them out in nature, but my kids are never quiet at all. They don't sit down ever. Did you have any good tips from your kids on how you can enable that, or some good tricks? Because I'd love to be able to enable that more, but I'm not very artistic.
I wish I did. I'm not sure that I do. One of them is listening. Let me see if she chimes in. No, not yet. But you know, it's funny because none of my kids were interested in art when they were in school. Even though they had the opportunity, they would dabble and play, but they weren't particularly interested in it. However, they went with me on so many of my place finding journeys. And that was a great gift to our lives, was being able to, even from the time they were babies in backpacks, to take them into places and have them be there and have them sometimes quietly, sometimes not quietly. True story. I was giving a talk at Lurelay at Lake O'Hara Lodge one year, and my son Matthew was about 5, and he was with me, and it was a little slideshow in a tiny little building with 30 people in the audience. And as I'm concluding my talk, I see this little hand doing this on it, like making the little doggy on my slideshow. So they weren't always 100% engaged with what I was doing, but I kind of think that their children are sponges, and they soaked it up. And now they are all absolute lovers of the mountains. None of them are artists, but they're incredibly creative people, and they have an awareness and an interest and a sensitivity to it that I think came just by virtue of children being sponges. So pursue, stay on with your taking them out there and showing them, and in whatever way it is, and they'll sponge it up. They will. Drag them around galleries. That's the other thing I did. Yeah, I did drag them around a lot of galleries. A lot of galleries.
I'm scared too, because I feel like I'll have the "you break it, you bought it" thing happen to me.
Galleries are all set up for that kind of thing. They have the paintings high, and the children are low, and yeah. But because all that stuff that they take in, all those things that they take in sensorially, shape them and make them who they are, and they make them. I think they make them better at looking, and I think that's really important for art, is concentrated time looking, like really looking at a painting, not just glancing and walking away, really looking.
Yeah, no, perfect. Well, thanks a lot, Lisa. I really appreciate it was great hearing you chat tonight.
Thanks for participating. Thank you.
I don't think we have any questions, and we were going to keep things pretty short just because it's the evening and people should get outside, walk their dog, connect with that nature that makes everybody feel calm and connected and their head clears. Ben, I'll let you wrap it up.
Yeah, thank you everybody for coming. This has been Lisa, is it Christensen? Christensen, sorry. Yeah, and that was quite an amazing presentation. It was a really nice talk. I really enjoyed just talking with you and with everybody else.
Thanks for having me. It was my pleasure.
Great. And Lisa, if you wanna plug your hiking guided hikes with White Museum, they helped us connect us with you. So you might as well.
Yes, my husband and I, he's a geologist, we run a series of guided hikes to places where artists have worked and where there's incredibly cool geology in the mountains, and watch the website for the White Museum's website for that, because it's ever unfolding with COVID restrictions and other things. And they also carry all of my books if you're interested in showing your kids some art, looking at some art, or following the trail guide format to the places where artists have sat to work. They carry them all there at their shop. Thanks for the plug. Thanks for the plug to plug my stuff. Thanks.
Of course, we all need a plug.
Yeah, so also I guess I should just mention we are continuing the summit tomorrow. It's our last and final day. So right at 9 a.m. we have an action workshop, and at 10 a.m. we have our climate change panel, and we're featuring a lot of great people, including Caroline Hedden, who is the founder of Canadian Rockies Repeat, that organization who is hosting that challenge, the art challenge that I talked about before. So,
Right.
So Lisa,
That would
you
be
should
great.
tune into that one.
I saw that show. I definitely will tune into that one. That's great. It's great. We've got
Okay, well, and that event at 10 a.m. is open to the public, so feel free to join in on the YouTube or the Zoom link if you have that.
Thanks.
Bye, everyone. Good night. Get outside.
Bye.
Have a good evening. Bye now.